Hey guys, today's video lecture topic is the characteristic of life. Make sure you are filling out your notes organizer. Make sure it's completely filled out if you would like to use it for the quiz. So biology is the study of life in living organisms. But what is life? How do we know something is alive? Well, all living things have these 8 characteristics in common, and we will go into more detail of each characteristic throughout this PowerPoint. Make sure that you guys list these 8 characteristics. Made of one or more cells, displays organization, grows and develops, reproduces, responds to stimuli, requires energy, maintains homeostasis, adapts to the environment. Those are the 8 characteristics of life. Before we go into the characteristics of life, first you need to know what an organism is, or what is what an organism is. So an organism is anything that has or once had all 8 characteristics of living things. And these are some examples of organisms. Of course, we know that animals and plants are alive, but we also need to realize that bacteria are living things, mushrooms are living things. So the first characteristic that we're going to talk about in more detail: all living things are made of one or more cells. The cell is the basic unit or building block of life. We have 2 types of organisms and these are vocabulary words that you need to know. Unicellular is an organism that is made up of a single cell. Uni means single or one, and so a unicellular is a single-celled organism. And then we have multicellular. Multicellular organisms are made up of many cells. Multi means many, and so a multicellular organism is a many-cell organism. And all cells contain genetic information or DNA. Okay, all living things display organization. So living things are very organized. They have specific structures for each structure has a specific function. So make sure that you are filling out your chart, the pyramid. Atoms are at the bottom, and so an atom is the smallest unit of matter. Many atoms join together to form molecules. Many molecules join together to form organelles. Many organelles are joined together and form a cell. So you have a mitochondria. That's an example of an organelle. And a mitochondria, its function is to provide energy. So that can be your example that you use for letter A. And many cells join together to form tissues. Many tissues join together to form organs. Many organs join together to form organ systems. And many organ systems join together to form organisms. All living things grow and develop. And there is a difference between growth and development. Growth is increasing in mass or getting bigger. And development is when you have changing and forming different abilities. So for example, you see the bullfrog tadpole. This bullfrog tadpole, it grows and develops into an adult bullfrog. And the tadpole looks very different from, a big bullfrog. And the tadpole, like, it loses its tail, its gills change into lungs, the legs are formed. So those are all it's developing, it's changing and forming different abilities. The next characteristic we're going to talk about is all living things are capable of reproduction. Organisms reproduce and pass along traits from one generation to the next. So reproduction is the production of offspring. And what is the purpose of reproduction? The purpose of reproduction is so that organisms can pass along their traits. And that is very important. And in the box, you see the asexual versus sexual reproduction. Make sure that you're filling out the Venn diagram. This will be a recurring theme in biology. We will come back to this. And it's important that you know the difference between asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction is when you have one parent and all of the offspring that are formed are identical. And so an example of an organism that go through asexual reproduction is a bacteria. Sexual reproduction is when you have two parents and the offspring are genetically different from the parent. So organisms that go through sexual reproduction would be animals. Okay, all living things respond to stimuli. Living things will make changes in response to their environment. So it's important that living things are able to respond to stimuli in the environment. A stimulus, and these are important vocabulary words, stimulus is anything that causes some sort of reaction in an organism. A response is how that organism reacts to the stimuli. So say, for example, I'm hiding behind a corner and I jump out, boom, and then you scream, ah! Okay, so let's talk about what's the stimulus and what is the response. So the stimulus is the fact that when I jump out of the corner, that's the stimuli. And your response is you scream because you weren't expecting me to jump out from that corner. So, okay, the next characteristic we're going to talk about is the fact that all living things require energy. Living things need energy to carry out their life processes. Many processes that occur in the human body require energy. And not just in humans, in all organisms, like plants, they go through photosynthesis and they need energy to power that process. And so there are 3 types of organisms, and this is another recurring theme, like you guys will see these words again. And so an autotroph is an organism that produces their own food. Auto means automatically, troph is food. So autotrophs produce their own food and they get the energy from the sunlight. An example of an autotroph would be a plant. A heterotroph is an organism that has to consume other organisms for their energy. So they eat or take in other organisms to get energy. And an example would be this little gopher or an animal. Those are heterotrophs. And finally, decomposers are organisms that break down dead and decaying material. And an example of a decomposer would be the mushroom. And they are nature's recycler. So they break down that dead and decaying matter. Okay, all living things maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is the regulation of an organism's internal conditions to maintain life. And so homeostasis is a way that organisms maintain that balance, and that is so very important. It is important for an organism, to maintain stability, to be stable, to be balanced. And humans, we are very complex. We want our temperature to stay the same. Our pH has to be a certain within a certain range, and so all of these this requires balance. So, in the picture, you see this guy. He's hot. Obviously, he's sweating, and that is a way of him maintaining homeostasis or balance in his body. When we sweat, the sweat evaporates off of our skin and it cools our body temperature down. So that is a way for our body to cool down. And then in reverse, if we're really cold, we start to shiver, and that is a way of us warming up our body temperature. So homeostasis is a very important vocabulary word. You will hear this word throughout biology, and it's just maintaining that stable internal environment. Okay, the next characteristic we're going to talk about is the fact that all living things adapt to their environment. So an adaptation is any inherited characteristic that results from changes to a species over time. It helps a species to survive. And the short version, like if you don't feel like copying all of that, you can just say that an adaptation is an inherited trait that helps an organism survive in its environment. An organism that is well adapted to its environment is more likely to survive. And a strong species is a species that is genetically varied or that has lots of genetic variation on many different traits. And so you see down here, Darwin's finches. All of these birds are adapted to their environment. Their beak is shaped or is adapted for the type of food that they eat. And so this is a very important concept. We will definitely come back to this concept in our evolution unit. Okay, so there are the 8 characteristics of life. Make sure you have those written down. Make sure that your notes organizer is filled out. And then finally, you have a list of terms. You have to place the terms in the appropriate column as being either biotic or abiotic. So I'll do a couple with you guys, and then you guys will do the rest on your own. If you can't figure out one, then use the internet. So, first one, rocks. Are rocks biotic or abiotic factor? Okay, a rock is an abiotic factor. It is non-living. Okay, next one, mushrooms. Mushrooms are biotic. Yes, they are living. Okay, and sand. Sand is not alive. It is abiotic. So make sure that you finish filling out the rest and putting them in the appropriate column. If you don't know one, then, use the internet. Make sure that your notes organizer is completely filled out if you want to use it for the quiz. Okay, have a good day.